Hey everybody, welcome back to Earthly Headlines. Today, as always, headline along with a good scientific article, and I'm going to link both in the description at the end. This one centers around a pretty interesting topic and pretty controversial because it's kind of marked by a lot of speculation about human evolution and the evolution of the brain. And it's been known that there's a known mystery that the human, somewhere along the line in human development, our brain size, the size exploded in a very short amount of time. And there have been a lot of speculations, I suppose, about why that happened and how that came about. And there have been a few theories that have been interesting. But it kind of explores that same path in terms of a sudden change in human physiology based on generations and generations of evolution. And this article kind of centers around human motor function, specifically in the hands and manual dexterity. And apparently humans 500,000 plus and older, they had a different type of dexterity and strength than the humans after 500,000 or 500,000 years and earlier. No, later. I'm sorry. 500,000 years and later. Apparently we, as anatomically modern humans, have inherited better hands and better tool-making ability. And so let's just dig into the article, because I think there's a lot of, I can see a lot of holes and a lot of question marks still, but this is a very interesting subject, and I'm glad that they're exploring this human cognitive and physiological, not expectations, but potential ability. So this article comes from the independent.co.uk under their science and archaeology section, and the headline reads, "Stone Age treasures unearthed in Sussex offers extraordinary insight into evolution of human intelligence." So they're linking this manual ability with evolution and creativity. So here's a nice photo. This is an artist's impression of Boxgrove is the site in which they found these tools. I'm bearing the lead here, but let's just kind of go over step by step what happened. So there was a quarry in Boxgrove that they found a bunch of old stone tools, like straight edges, bifaces, and hand axes specifically. Arguably, the most important driving force that enabled early humans to evolve into ever more intelligent creatures was the human hand. So I've heard this before. If you guys have ever read Terence McKenna, he talks about the stoned ape theory and how this was his theory about the sudden increase of human cognitive ability and the increase in brain size. About 70,000. So the theory goes like this: 70,000 years ago, humans started experimenting with psychotropic drugs like mushrooms, specifically psilocybin mushrooms, and that kind of spurred on this creative, I guess, a new path of thought that humans did not, up until that point, they weren't exposed to. So that led to all kinds of creativity. It led to the throwing arm. I don't want to get too much into it here. You guys can do your own research. But basically, McKenna links new physical abilities that were unlocked by some sort of event. In McKenna's case, it was taking mushrooms. In this case, it's the need for new techniques, better and more refined tool-making techniques that put us on the path toward an evolutionary path towards stronger hands, like grip strength and dexterity, being able to, the way we grip the stone and the way we strike the stone and sharpen it. That was all, that didn't come out of the box, according to this. We had to develop those skills over generations. Without that crucial ability, tool making, there would never have been the need to imagine and visualize complex objects purely in the mind, or the ability to then invent, manufacture, and use them. Yeah, so this visualizing abstract things in your mind without actually having it in front of you that was a super crucial skill for us in order to make that leap into real life and a real life application. So the innovation that we apparently uncovered was visualization, and that kind of ties in again with what McKenna was saying. We were able to visualize other possibilities through the use of psychedelics. Well, in this case, instead of ingesting a mushroom and getting this this new wave of thoughts and creativity, instead of that being the catalyst, tool making was the catalyst. I hope that makes sense. Now, archaeologists have demonstrated for the first time that a particular type of stone tool used some 500,000 years ago could not have been made without modern human-like hands. Now, this term modern human, it's kind of a really vague term. Like, what constitutes a modern human? I mean, there's me, right, a guy living now, and then there's a woman in Russia. We're both living at the same time, but we have a completely like different genetic makeup. Like, she might have more Neanderthal DNA than I do, or I might have more whatever DNA than she does. So you can kind of see an incongruency there. But anyway, we're just, for the sake of this video, we're just gonna go with their terminology of modern human-like hands. And I think what they mean by that is the level of dexterity and skill we have with them now. And they achieved that 500,000 years ago, according to the study. The study, based on beautifully made prehistoric tools found at Boxgrove, reveals for the first time that early Stone Age humans had modern-style human hands, despite the fact that they belong to a human species ancestral to our own, but which became extinct more than 300,000 years ago. So they had the same hands as us, or we inherited their hands, but they died off 300,000 years ago while we were branched off and lived to today. Research in the UK and US supports the concept that early human intellectual ability was largely developed in tandem with, and to a considerable extent courtesy of, hand evolution. That eventually we, Homo sapiens, inherited our super dexterous hands from prehistoric humans, which existed before the Neanderthals. So again, to put these things in perspective, Neanderthals were they died out around 40,000 years ago. This is 500,000 years ago. So these, maybe Neanderthals were living back then too, but these were the precursors to them. Specific stone tools which were analyzed as part of the study were sophisticated flint hand axes, which had required a special technique to shape them. So this special technique is known as platform preparation. It's a simple single-stage affair in which the toolmaker merely hits a lump of flintstone repeatedly to systematically knock small bits off until the lump has been reduced to a desired shape. So it's very simple. You're just sort of molding this really hard rock into whatever shape you want, usually a spearhead. Here's a picture. This is the actual photo. Let me zoom out. So this is an actual hand axe that was made, or that was found 500,000 years, or that dates back to 500,000 years ago, but found in Boxgrove. So this is the actual one. This isn't a replica. And this is an example of the single stage platform preparation. As you go along the human history, like as the evolution progresses, more sophisticated tool makers emerged. First, they would successfully soften up small portions of the flint surface so as to then be able to more accurately remove flakes from it, thus creating a much more sophisticated and effective tool with a better and more refined cutting edge. So they went from a single step to two steps. So the step that they added was, instead of using this hard rock, let's soften it up so we can mold it into a better, more accurate portrayal of what was in our mind. Let's make the edge thin, more sharp. Let's get rid of all the excess weight so we can better apply our energy from our arm into this tool. That's proven. This is in the archaeological record. So this is what the scientists did. They attached electronic sensors to the hands of skilled modern flint knappers. So this is where a lot of the holes start to come in the study. I mean, it's not a gaping hole, but a lot of people would have an issue because these are people who are living today who are being tested. So the sample is not, I mean, it's impossible to, without a time machine, to go back and get someone and bring an authentic person. But this is the best we can do. Just a disclaimer. We have to have skilled modern flint knappers, which that's the terminology. Person who does this is a flint knapper. Archaeologists from the University of Kent were able to demonstrate that platform preparation was only achievable by prehistoric people equipped with anatomically modern human-like hands. So they were somehow able to prove that ancient people with our hands were able to do this, but the ones who didn't have our physiology and the neurological software to guide our that physiology, they couldn't do it. They were only able to do the really primitive tool creation process. Research demonstrates that box grove early humans probably had significantly stronger grips compared to earlier populations. So a lot of this centers around grip strength. This in turn implies that they were also theoretically able to make a large range of other artifacts that require strong, dexterous hands, things made out of wood, antler, and bone. I know we did an article about Eric the Red and how that he made stuff out of ivory. So those skills didn't just pop up 1,000 years ago. Like that's been in use for thousands and thousands of years prior to that. This is what Dr. Key says. Our experimental research not only suggests that early humans at least 500,000 years ago had anatomically modern human-like hands, but when combined with other recent research, can also help us understand the way in which the human hand, brain, and other anatomical elements co-evolved. So I always talk about superimposing other research and studies from other fields with the one that we're currently analyzing, and that's what the doctor is saying. He's kind of he thinks this study is very useful, not just as a standalone study, but also as a supplemental study with other similar but not the same research, and then from there we can garner more hints as to how this the temple that we know as our human body became to be what it is. I mean, there are a lot of people who think that we've been like this since day one and no evolution occurred, and there's evidence on that side as well from what I hear and from what I've read. But this also seems really compelling too, this because I believe through generations of doing and perfecting certain things, our body will adjust over time, if that makes sense. You can kind of, it's almost like domestication in a sense, except we're not domesticating ourselves, we're augmenting ourselves through thousands and thousands of years and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of generations. They also found another site on another continent in South Africa, on the east, in Ethiopia, on the East Africa. They also found similar tools that date even further, 850,000 years ago. So this platform preparation technique was being used for stone tool manufacture in Ethiopia and in South Africa as well. In light of these findings, it's quite clear that humanity developed its manual dexterity, its intelligence, and its manufacturing ability as part of a long interactive process across at least 2 and probably 3 continents. This is a replica hand axe right here. So this was done by a modern person, and it looks very similar to the other one, right? Let me scroll back up. Very similar. We've been able to do this for a long time. We've had the tool-making software, so to speak, in our genes for a while. Just an aside, the same theory is said about language. So they say that language, it was created because of a necessity in the natural world. So one of the reasons why they think language exploded was because we needed to cooperate with each other better in order to meet the natural standards required to survive in the world at that time. So either if we didn't cooperate and we didn't utilize language, then we would die off. But the populations that did use that innovation, that communicative innovation, they were able to branch off and thrive and survive until the modern day. So this is a very similar thing. Instead of speech, this is actually hand-eye coordination, stuff like that. Right here, so in order to survive, they had to evolve ways of administering physical force through their hands in ever more efficient ways, because obviously our hands aren't stronger than other animals. Our jaws aren't as strong as other animals, so we had to, like water, we had to, go around those obstacles and overcome them through our mind and our capacity for intelligence. over thousands of generations through natural selection in the shape of the design of their hands to apply physical force more efficiently drove changes. That physical ability to make things in turn and drove additional evolutionary changes in their brains to enable them to even more effectively envisage and invent the ever more sophisticated items they needed to help them and survive and flourish. Right, just what I said. Although there is one thing. Drove additional evolutionary changes in their brains to enable them to more effectively envisage. Okay, so what is that mechanism? Like, I would like to extract that and analyze that process. If people do something long enough for as many generations as it takes, eventually it becomes inexorably part of our DNA. Like, we can will that into our DNA. Is that true? I mean, it might be true. I mean, that's what this is, right? That's almost like magic. You can kind of will it into existence, not in your lifetime maybe, but if you were able to somehow pass this on and on through your offspring and then their offspring all the way down the line, will you eventually have a family of stonecutters like that are born knowing this? I don't know. That would be a really interesting study that, I don't know, maybe we'd have to be immortal to really carry that out. Anyway, that's always bugged me. Not saying that evolution's BS. On the contrary, I just think that there's something there untapped that we haven't really either considered or we haven't figured out a way to really to document or analyze that effectively to come to an actual conclusion. So part of the study that they did was they took these novice tool makers and they told them the technique, and then the scientists analyzed and recorded how long it took for them to actually competently acquire these skills, and it took 250 hours to do so. So not that long. I mean, it's, if you're living in a village and the village is known for using these techniques, it does make sense. 250 hours is not that long. That's like what, a few months? Less than 6 months to really become competent? Not master, not to have mastery, but just to be a competent tool maker. I mean, that seems really feasible to me, because it's not like you're making samurai swords where it takes probably 10,000 hours plus of just being an apprentice to learn that skill. This is just, stone cutting, basically. So what I'm trying to say here is it's an easily passable technique when you're dealing with primitive people. Let's take a look at just for clarity's sake, I want to go over the scientific article that comes from, what's the name of it? PeerJ. This is from PeerJ. And it's titled Manual Restrictions on Paleolithic Technological Behaviors. The Oldowan Acheulean Transition and Technological Developments during the subsequent million years of the technocomplex. They approach the question of why innovative stone tool production techniques occur in the lower Paleolithic archaeological record from an experimental, biomechanical, and evolutionary perspective. And this is what they found. Results indicate that more heavily reduced, intensively shaped hand axes with greater volumetric controls do not necessarily require significantly greater manual pressure than Oldowan flake tools or earlier rougher hand axe forms. Platform preparation events do, however, require significantly greater pressure relative to either soft or hard hammer flake detachments. No significant relationships were identified between flaking success and pressure variation. The production of the late Acheulean hand axes could possibly have been restricted prior to the emergence of more forceful precision manipulative capabilities than those required for earlier lithic technology. So basically they're saying there's a point in history where after there was an emergence of more forceful precision capabilities than those required from earlier lithic technologies, and they were able to prove that through the anatomy of the hand. So they could see the strength increase through generations and generations of people, and it was evidence because there was they measured the joints, the muscles attached to the bone, the angles at which they were, I guess the sinews went. It's very, very detailed and very, very technical study that I don't want to get into too much here, but I will link it so you guys can, on your own time, you guys could have a look yourselves. It's a really interesting article. I mean, it could be disputed, but this is a peer-reviewed article, and it seems to be generally accepted by the archaeological community. And it cites a number of other similar studies that have been done as well, and it's kind of building on top of those. So it's a very interesting read. I highly suggest you guys read this if you're on your lunch break or something, and you can really understand better the history of the tools. So like right here, the earliest intentionally flake stone tools are currently from the 3.3 million year old site in West Turkana in Kenya. They were more primitive in their use, the passive hammer percussive strategy, and then 2.6 million years onward, it changed again. It was characterized by expedient production of variably sized flake cutting tools from handheld cores using hard hammer percussion. And then after 1.75 million years, it changed again. Bifacially flake core tools appear in the archaeological record across East Africa as part of the Acheulean techno complex, which is a whole nother video in and of itself. And then these tools are characterized, they're more sophisticated. They're hand axes and cleavers using hard hammer percussion. So you guys can see up until 300,000 years, the nature and extent of any chronological changes to stone technology are debated, but there are indications that the later tools were at times produced using soft hammer percussion, became thinner relative to their width, and displayed greater evidence of intentional thinning, volume control, investment, time and skill, and shaping and symmetry. So you can track, this is really interesting, but just by looking at the tools and the human anatomy at the same time, you can see the changes in both. And that seems like an exhaustive study in and of itself. So what do you guys think? Do you think this is all BS? Am I gullible? I mean, I'm just taking what's interesting and I'm presenting it to you guys. I'm not taking a side, but it does make sense that over time people would improve their skills, especially if it's uninterrupted. If the skills were able to be passed down through generation and generation without like any, let's say, super volcano or a tsunami or a cosmic impact or something, pole shift, I could see how these techniques could transfer over generations and manifest in our physiology. So that's a really interesting mind over matter type of subject that I think is, or maybe not mind over matter, mind can control where matter goes and the course of its evolution. So let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.